Oh, 2025. What a year you were. And by that I mean it was a pretty bad year across the board, both on a larger scale and even just personally. And I'd love to chime in about how at least the gaming scene was great and helped distract us from everything else, but that sadly wasn't the case. If 2025 will be remembered for anything, it'll be how often the gaming industry was impacted by real-world affairs and destructive trends that have tarnished the other entertainment sectors but have finally come knocking to start ruining video games. Generative AI continues to encroach and envelop like a plague, layoffs were dizzying with how often they happened, and a worsening economy is threatening to price everyday people out of one of their favorite hobbies, along with everything else. I'm not going to pretend like all this came out of nowhere and that the writing wasn't on the wall, but the onslaught of bad news this year was overwhelming at points, and it feels like large parts of the industry are incredibly close to buckling at this stage. That being said, if you could drag yourself away from the headlines and doom posting long enough to actually play some new games this year, you'd find that 2025 still had its fair share of good stuff. Indie creators and studios are consistently proving to be the real way forward for gaming right now, and when the corporate robots at the top of AAA gaming could stop making the worst decisions ever, it was still clear that their devs were capable of making some solid titles that could hold their ground, albeit with a few more thorns than years past. I guess we need to try and enjoy what the bubble can provide before it completely burst. So yeah, this is my top 10 games of the year. And since this is my first time making a list like this, I'm making two rules for myself. Number one, only games I've played, because fun fact, I'm just a person and don't have the ability to buy and play every game released in a year. There was just some stuff I didn't have the time for or just don't have the means to access right now, so my apologies to Doom the Dark Ages, Ghost of Yotei, Death Stranding 2, Lego Party, and Metroid Prime 4. Number two, no remakes or remasters. I don't know if this rule will stick if I do this for the following years, but for now, I've played enough brand new games that I'd love to give my attention to. That said, honorable mentions to both Pac-Man World 2 Repack and Yooka-Laylee. Also a shout out to that Oblivion remaster. I didn't play that one, but it seems pretty cool. Hopefully I'll make time for it next year. With all that said, shall we begin? These are my top 10 games of 2025. I know I very subtly alluded to it earlier, but this was the year where I was way more interested in the indie scene than I was in AAA gaming. There's several interlocking reasons for that, but I think I can boil it down by saying I was far more willing to play a bunch of smaller, cheaper games with a lovingly crafted niche than I was to shell out $70 for a single new game in a franchise that feels like it's running on fumes. Them's your options. You can either pay full price for the newest game in a franchise that hasn't been at its best in a long time, like Call of Duty or Borderlands or Pokemon, or you could use that money to buy half a dozen indie games where chances are one or two of them will give you exactly what you want. I must have been in an especially silly mood when I saw a Steam game called The Trolley Solution, a game inspired by the trolley problem thought experiments which are meant to test a person's ethics and morals and whether one would stand by and let a trolley kill 5 people, or pull a lever to save those 5 at the cost of sacrificing another person on a different track. It's certainly a unique basis for a game, but don't go thinking this will actually teach you anything about philosophy or solving ethical dilemmas. Instead, it uses that concept as a springboard for increasingly wacky scenarios and even wackier minigames that are sometimes only tangentially related to the whole trolleys running over people thing. I guess you could complain about the game not being as intellectually stimulating as you'd like, but there comes a point where you go from solving math questions to raising a Tamagotchi to playing Crazy Taxi that you realize that this was never going to be the game for that, and just start enjoying the ride along with whatever crazy scenarios it brings forth. This might actually be the funniest game I played this year, which puts me in a weird position because I want to convince people to play this game without just spoiling all the best bits, but you'll just have to take my word for it. It's a short trip, only being around 2 to 3 hours, but considering it's only $10 and that a game like this was best off not overstaying its welcome anyway, I'd say the Trolley Solution is exactly what it needed to be. I can't wait to apply what I've learned here to the real world. 3D platformer fans were absolutely feasting this year, weren't they? There have definitely been some highlights in the last few years, but before 2025, the last year that felt like such a massive resurgence for the genre was 2017. And that was the year with Mario Odyssey, A Hat in Time, Yooka-Laylee, and the Crash Insane trilogy, so it was bound to take a while to hit on that level again. I already gave an honorable mention to the efforts of both Pac-Man World 2 Repack and Yooka-Laylee for taking the fun but undeniably flawed originals and polishing them up considerably to make them the superior versions of those games for me. And there's a certain great ape that you can bet on seeing later, but right near the end of the year, the Little Yellow Sponge came back to continue his hot streak of surprisingly good licensed games. Oh yeah, I'm going there. Yes, big surprise that the SpongeBob game made it on my list, but believe me, if I really wasn't a fan of it, I would have benched it for this video. I was meaning to give Titans of the Tide a short review before working on this, but the timing forced my hand to leave it on the back burner for now. So I don't want to go overboard on the details when I'm only a few weeks removed from talking about it again. What I will say, however, is that Titans of the Tide is indeed pretty good. After Purple Lamp's stellar work on Cosmic Shake, I was curious what their next SpongeBob game would look like, and I can't say I was expecting this. A battle of egos between King Neptune and the Flying Dutchman that completely decimates Bikini Bottom and beyond, with SpongeBob and Patrick teaming up to stop the feud and get things back to normal. Okay then. Oh man, but once things got going, I had a hard time putting this down. Titans of the Tide surprised me with how actually kinda challenging and mechanically complex it could get. Far from the hardest game I played this year, but being able to swap between SpongeBob and Patrick at the press of a button, with both fully kitted up in their own distinct abilities and movement skills, gives the moment-to-moment gameplay a chance to flex in a way very few SpongeBob games have been able to. And that's before getting into the other consistent strengths that SpongeBob games tend to have, like the appealing visuals, charming if not especially gut-busting writing, and overall fantastic synergy and respect for the source material. The attention to detail really does go a long way here. It's definitely up there as one of the new top-tier SpongeBob games, but when put alongside all the games this year, its shortcomings are a bit more obvious. It's definitely lacking in polish in places, more than I'd like to admit, and I was kinda baffled at how it only has 5 main areas, which leaves the game feeling sweet, but painfully short compared to something like Cosmic Shake or Battle for Bikini Bottom. Still, this is definitely a solid effort, and I can't wait for whatever Purple Lamp cooks up next. You think they'd ever try a Revenge of the Flying Dutchman remake? Oh, Nintendo, where did you go wrong? Plenty of big gaming companies get shit on every year for, well, being big gaming companies where it feels like all the decisions are being dictated by corporate moneymen at the top who don't even play video games and only care about chasing trends and squeezing every dime out of their customers for the sake of impressing their shareholders, but Nintendo usually avoids getting lumped in with the worst of that crowd because for all their own incredibly aggravating faults, their worst tends to be small time in comparison to the likes of Ubisoft or EA. Let's just say 2025 was a big year for change. And for the record, I still don't think Nintendo is this evil giant worthy of hundreds upon hundreds of Nintendo bad videos with AI-generated thumbnails and people milking the same game a dozen times for ad revenue, but no one can deny that their public reputation took a massive hit this year, probably more so than any other game company. And I can see why. The Switch 2 was the first Nintendo console released under completely new leadership after the passing of Iwata and retiring of Reggie, and this must have been seen as the perfect opportunity to implement a lot of new, not-so-savory changes. This is why we have a $450 console with $70 games despite Nintendo seemingly being the budget-friendly option. It's why we have Nintendo Switch 2 editions that expect you to cough up an extra $10 to $20 for meaningless new content or the privilege of making use of the better hardware to run your games better. It's why Nintendo has felt so money hungry this year, whether it be amiibos, accessories, DLC, or even just a playable manual. It has rightfully put a lot of people off Nintendo and forced remaining fans like me to stay leery. That being said, the actual workers and developers in Nintendo prove that they still have the chops to make some great games despite all the extra baggage. And controversial as it may be, one of my favorites from this year was Mario Kart World. And let's just get the obvious thing out of the way. $80 for this game was, and still is, kind of outrageous. But I, like many others, was able to take advantage of the Switch 2 bundle, which essentially makes this game $50, which is way more reasonable and a price I didn't mind paying. There's a lot that can be said about Mario Kart World, but I think what we need to acknowledge is that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was always going to be a borderline impossible act to follow up on immediately. 8 Deluxe is the near universal favorite game in the series because of how it feels like the pinnacle of traditional Mario Kart, and for the sheer amount of content it has to offer, despite more than half of it coming out after 8's initial launch on the Wii U. Once you acknowledge that, and accept that Mario Kart World is more meant to complement 8 Deluxe right now rather than outright replace it, I think World is way easier to enjoy as its own thing. You can tell so much thought and care went into mapping out and creating this open world, filled to the brim of racetracks, gorgeous scenery, and plenty of that Mario flair, and even now, I still find myself a little stunned at how massive this place is, and yet how well crafted every inch of it is. The controls are fine-tuned to feel the best they ever have, and extra tricks like jumping, wall riding, and rail grinding simultaneously increase both the skill ceiling and the visual variety of racing. Knockout Tour as this Mario Kart Battle Royale is still a genius new idea for the series that I'm still not tired of. The courses themselves are excellent, barely any filler, and the quality far outweighs the quantity, with my personal favorites being the revamped Dino Dino Jungle and Peach Beach, along with the newcomers in DK Spaceport, Dry Bones Burnout, and World's take on Rainbow Road. And I'm gonna say it,
maybe my favorite soundtrack of the year? It's hard to call, but I don't think any other game's music puts such a big smile on my face. I'm not gonna say all of World's new ideas work for me. The open world is cool, but playing free roam to find collectibles and play missions for stickers loses a lot of its luster after a while. I think the route intermission portions that you have to drive on before getting to an actual race course can get pretty boring, especially with how straight and broad the roads are. I think 24 racers on the track is, in theory, a fun escalation, but in practice just makes it feel even worse when you're constantly getting bombarded by items. Coming from someone who's played a ton of every Mario Kart since Double Dash, this one feels the most luck-based, which is a shame since it's the same game that introduced all the extra movement tech. But there's no denying that all the fun wall jump shortcuts are just no match for you sandbagging yourself for your 8th golden mushroom that race. And Nintendo pushing back on online players and forcing them to play those intermissions more often, yeah, that's a big no-no, guys. The bad stuff about this game definitely threatens to spoil the whole pot, but I think it's safe to assume Nintendo is aware of the game's problems based on its recent updates, which are chipping away at core issues like the online play and the route tracks, so I'm more inclined to say this game will be looked on more favorably as time goes on, but who knows. It took a lot of sacrifices to give us a playable Bonefish.
I know I said earlier that 2025 was the year for 3D platformers, but a very close second has to go to racing games. Obviously, the first real Mario Kart game in 11 years was a big deal, but when it wasn't quite everything people had hoped for, it left a few other competitors the perfect chance to speed past and steal players' attention. You be careful now, Mr. Jumpman. You wouldn't want your old rival to show you up now, would you? This one really snuck up on me. I knew Sonic Racing Crossworlds was Sonic's big game for 2025, but I largely avoided the trailers and completely ignored the open betas. I think I've just been Sonic'd out for the past few years, but I did find myself slowly coming around as I heard all the positive buzz surrounding the pre-release. Just what did this particular Sonic Racing game do to be the one to bring people together? As it turns out, Sonic Racing Crossworlds ended up being a better traditional Mario Kart game than Mario Kart World could ever hope for. And mind you, if all the pros this game had to offer were the standard Grand Prix structure with typical 3-lap tracks, Crossworlds would have no business being on this list. There's gotta be more to this, yeah? Oh, hell yeah. Crossworlds isn't just some fancy subtitle, it's the main focus with your racetrack never staying the same for long. Laps 1 and 3 might be from the course you were advertised, but lap 2 warps you to a completely different course for a change in scenery and to prevent anyone from getting too comfortable. Hence, the Crossworlds part. It doesn't sound like a lot, but considering how wide the pool of tracks is and that first place gets to choose where everyone is going, it is a pretty cool mechanic. I also love the gadget system, which essentially makes this game part deck builder by letting players adjust their playstyle with these little add-ons. You can modify your stats, determine what types of items you're more likely to get, make it easier for you to gain or hold on to rings, and that's only scratching the surface. This game has its own flair and depth that goes way beyond just being another Mario Kart clone, and that does help to counter its own weak points like the grinding for unlockables, less than satisfactory water controls, and a comparative lack of polish compared to something like Mario Kart World. I guess I could also praise Crossworlds for taking advantage of its theme by letting Sonic cross over with other franchises to give the game even more characters and tracks to choose from. I'll admit that the fact that this game has a defined roadmap for future content is what ultimately nudged this game ahead of Mario Kart World for me as of now. And while I'm tickled at the prospect of playing as Hatsune Miku and SpongeBob, I don't think the guest characters come close to thrilling me the way the actual Sonic character roster does. The fact that Cream, the Chaotix, and even the Babylon Rogues are all here and playable in the year 2025 feels unreal to me. Go back to the mid to late 2010s or even the early 2020s and it felt like the series didn't even like itself, and was only willing to pull supporting characters out if it was to immediately drag them through the mud. To see that same series have such reverence for itself now with a character lineup like this, and courses like these, I pray we never have to go back. Not sure what's next for Sonic after this, but I do know I'll be paying very close attention to their next big 3D game. Way to pull me back in, guys. I'm getting really fed up with online multiplayer these days. That's a real shame because I love some good multiplayer, but after so many years of online live service games with battle passes, daily and weekly tasks, and whatever else they throw in to optimize engagement, I think I'm just completely tapped out on caring about these types of games, which wouldn't be a problem if this didn't feel like the only kind of multiplayer game that most of the industry wants to make in some clueless, gritty attempt at chasing Fortnite or Overwatch 1 success. How long do you think that upcoming Highguard game is going to last? 3 months? 4 months tops?
But at about the time I swore off Marvel Rivals, I decided to get some of my friends together to try one of this year's indie darlings, Peak, a game about you and your group of stranded scouts trying to climb a mountain. That sounds kinda basic and not all that interesting, but that's only half the fun. The other half comes from these guys. Yes, like Lethal Company and Repo before it, Peak has an incredibly simple premise and gameplay loop that is carried very far by their co-op, where things go wrong, people die, and everyone else is laughing. This type of game has been ironically and unironically called friend slop because when playing something like this by yourself, it is admittedly a very hollow experience. Single player in Mario Kart or Sonic Racing can still hold your attention. In Peak though, not so much. I do think that is an objective knock against the game, but you can always just not play a game like this when your friends aren't available. That sort of fixes the main problem there. And I can't deny, I think Peak's peaks are strong enough to pull it halfway up my list. There is some real camaraderie in working together to scale such treacherous terrain. There is genuine tension and fear when things go wrong, especially with how fast your stamina bar can be whittled down by hunger, damage, environmental effects, and even just the weight of what you're carrying. And yeah, above all else, this game is incredibly funny to mess around with, especially when you're all learning at the same time.
Ah!
Brian, where are you?
Where'd he go? Oh my god.
Where were you? Careful of the spiders, by the way. Oh, Brian. There's wind! There's wind!
Oh, fuck me.
Did we all just die? What if I cook them again? What was that? Was that because I tried to cook him a fourth time?
No, I tried to cook the lantern.
Oh, you're a fucking idiot. Go do it again.
I could honestly just play a couple clips of me and my buddies failing or talking shit to get my point across. It's just a super entertaining multiplayer game, and if that's somehow considered slop, well then I'm first to the trough. I haven't quite reached the top of the mountain yet, but me and my climbing party are all still eager to keep going until we have our first successful trek. Or maybe we'll just keep falling off of cliffs. I'm having fun either way. I think the type of game I played the most this year were roguelikes. I guess I just had a hankering for lots of RNG this year because I caught up on a lot of well-regarded roguelikes and roguelites this year that had been rotting in my backlog or my Steam wishlist. Enter the Gungeon, Slay the Spire, and Dead Cells all took up a fair amount of my time towards the middle of the year. And if we're just talking about 2025 releases, I took my chances on quite a few new faces, all of which I ended up liking. Well, except maybe Rainbreaker. But I really enjoyed both Haste and Ball X Pet, both of which I could see myself going the distance with. And then there's the most recent game I played to make this list, Megabonk. If you need proof that gamers are, in fact, not as hard to please as some would like you to believe, just take a look at Megabonk and how successful it's been. Sometimes people don't care about how cinematic your game is or how many individual pores you can make out on a character's face. Sometimes we'd be perfectly content playing a game with no story to speak of, with chunky polygonal N64 style graphics as long as the gameplay is incredibly fun and can keep a player organically hooked on an engaging loop. In Megabonk's case, all you really care about is surviving for as long as possible against infinitely respawning enemies that come after you in massive swarms, while scouring the map for items and shrines to improve your character. This is essentially 3D Vampire Survivors if it had the map structure of Risk of Rain 2, and that's such a tantalizing combination that feels tailor-made to produce one of the most addicting games ever. All for $10. The exit's that way, guys. I wouldn't blame you. The one more try mentality is on full display in Megabonk. You only have 10 minutes per map to explore and grow your character, and that time flies by fast as you're always on the lookout for the next point of interest, and because the sheer amount of enemies are always on the verge of overcoming your offense and ripping you to shreds. And you better find that boss platform before time is up, because afterwards, these ghost guys start blitzing you on all sides and often push you all over the place. It's kinda frustrating, but it's just as often hilarious with how absurd it ends up looking. Part of this game's appeal is admittedly just not taking it seriously at all and doing gigantic leaps across the map as a skeleton doing sick kickflips on a skateboard. The physics in general are super fun to mess around with. It's almost got that Source engine quality where you can use your own momentum or even enemy knockback to go soaring through the sky, and I love whenever it happens. But the way weapons synergize with your stat boost and other items might just take the cake. Going from throwing a single banana to throwing a dozen giant bananas that all have lifesteal seems crazy, and yet runs like this happen all the time. It's just fun. It's it's really fun. Granted, this game can be kind of mindless at times, but damn if the execution isn't the best I could possibly imagine for something like this. The last thing I'll mention is this game has very modern meme humor. Even the smallest things, like how monkey and dead are spelled monk and did. I don't really think it's an objective knock against the game because, again, the game is clearly not meant to be taken seriously, but I don't know how I feel about the game telling me I'm cooked. Or that I'm fighting a Scorpion SE. I think I'd find a lot of this really obnoxious and desperate if it were in a AAA game, but here, I guess I just found myself a little amused. This is my version of the flirting versus harassment meme, and I'm not elaborating. Vagabonk is just built different.
I never did play the original Hollow Knight. I've played tons of indie games over the years, but for all its success and acclaim, I never really felt compelled to try it. I think my past lack of interest in Metroidvanias was the part that really concerned me. I was worried I wasn't gonna quite get it. And I was worried that I wasn't gonna get the long-awaited sequel even more so. But I asked around, and the general consensus was that I would be okay without the first game under my belt. You can guess how well that worked out for me. So obviously, I fell head over heels for Silksong despite not playing the first game and not having to struggle wading through the game's extensive 7-year development, along with all the memes that spawned from it. And while I do indeed love the game, I think it's hilarious how often the news buzz surrounding this game far exceeded the buzz for the game itself. But to be fair, I totally get it. It's not every day where a game breaks every digital storefront because too many people are trying to buy and download a game at the same time. And of course, in a year where prices were such a hot topic and the AAA part of the industry was desperately trying to convince us that $70 and $80 games were absolutely necessary, it's hilarious and downright vindicating to have a long-awaited, highly anticipated sequel like this finally come out and only be $20. There is an actual video game here buried underneath all the headlines though, and what a game it is. Again, I've never played Hollow Knight, so I can't really verify how good Silksong is as a sequel, but as a video game on its own merits, Silksong is outstanding. I know I'm not the first to make this comparison, but Hollow Knight Silksong is one half Metroidvania and one half 2D Dark Souls. It's got the sprawling map full of secrets, heavy emphasis on platforming, and simplistic combat you expect from a Metroidvania, but pairs that up with the insanely tough but learnable monsters and heavy-handed punishment for dying that's a guarantee for any Souls-like. Okay, maybe I could have gone without that last part. My rosary beads are very precious to me. It never feels like too much though. You do have to fight tooth and nail for every bit of progress you make initially, but as you run through these same areas time and time again, you really do feel yourself getting better at the game's combat, and it feels incredibly cathartic to beat previously hellish enemies with little to no damage taken. And whenever I beat a boss in my first try, it really sunk in just how capable Hornet's moveset really was. The solution really is to get good. But if it's ever too much, you can take some time to explore the map to its fullest, maybe help these local bug pilgrims with their problems, and obtain more resources, more tools, and even new movement skills. You can tell I'm not that used to these sorts of games when I was super excited to get a wall jump, despite that basically being the free space on a Metroidvania bingo card. But hey, that doesn't make me love it less. Also, I gotta say, this might be my favorite looking game from this year. Anything hand-drawn is going to be a big winner for me, and while comparing this to Cuphead is admittedly a massive case of apples to oranges, I gotta say, Silksong absolutely nails what it's going for, both in the slower, more atmospheric moments where you can admire the characters and backgrounds, and the intense fights where the animations are smooth as butter and help contribute to how exhilarating the combat feels. I want to circle back to the characters though, because that's a real indication of how surprisingly versatile the art style is, where these insects can look adorable, monstrous, or anything in between. They made the fleas little puppy dogs. I just can't with that. I haven't quite finished it yet, but provided the game doesn't fall off a cliff at some point in Act 3, I think it's easily one of the best of the year. Obviously, it's not my personal game of the year, but I think this game probably should have won, just because it would have been the ultimate slap in the face to big publishers and what they want modern gaming to look like. And Team Cherry wasn't even trying to make some big, groundbreaking statement. They just wanted to make their fun, dark needle bug game the way they wanted to. Glad some people have their priorities straight. You thought we were done talking about racing games? Oh, you know very little, my friend. From where I'm standing, Mario Kart World and Sonic Racing Cross Worlds are both really good games that'll likely get better as time goes on, but for me, Another Kart Racer was miles ahead of both of them.
and it's the one starring the little pink gumball. In a year when Nintendo discourse was at an all-time high, it's telling that Kirby Air Riders was the one game that no one dared to lay a finger on. And the reason was simple: we haven't had a Nintendo game in years that seemed so confident in itself. In the same year where Metroid Prime 4 was piss scared to show more than a minute of itself off till the final stretch, Kirby Air Riders pre-release period was so thorough, so transparent, and yet so very exciting. I mean, really. The last Nintendo game whose wait period felt like this was Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Almost like they were directed by the same guy or something. Nearly 2 hours spent across 2 different dedicated directs, and Sakurai's enthusiasm never wanes. And it's so abundantly clear that this man knows how to sell people on his games, even when they aren't guaranteed sales juggernauts like Smash Bros. You can tell he made the game exactly the way he wanted. No studio meddling, no artificial push to broaden its appeal to as wide an audience as possible, none of the bullshit that only serves to make games less fun and less player first. If this was his free pass for toiling away on Smash Ultimate for so long, then I'd say it was incredibly well spent. The original Kirby Air Ride was decent, but Kirby Air Riders is a complete next-gen evolution across the board despite not straying that far from the original game. You've still got the original game's modes, but each is now stuffed, positively bursting at the seams with everything you could possibly want. More characters, more machines, more courses, more copy abilities, more features, more everything. This desire to add everything you could possibly want and beyond is felt throughout this entire game, and I respect the shit out of Sakurai for following his crazy passionate design philosophy of taking every idea he had, no matter how dumb or insignificant, and dumping it all in. So in addition to the original modes, we also have the most intricate vehicle customization I've ever seen, one of the best menus and UI I've ever seen, and a story mode that low-key stomps both World of Light and Subspace Emissary. Oh yeah, I really just said that. Oh, and the gummies. Can't forget those. Admittedly, I do think Air Riders shines way more as a chaotic party game than it does as an actual racing game. Air Ride and Top Ride are both really fun and polished like gems, but I don't think I'll be coming back to these all that often once those checklists are filled out. But City Trial... Ooh boy, City Trial. City Trial was the best thing about the OG Air Ride, and that is no different here. Collecting stat boost on this chunk of land, getting all these ridiculous items and events, crafting the best vehicle you can before getting tossed into an event that could test you in so many possible ways. It's the closest thing to an infinitely replayable mode that exists, and will definitely carry this game's online presence years down the line. I know Sakurai is likely getting dragged back into the Smash Mines after this, but I'd love to see him and his team taking this creative, all-out energy to other series. Could you imagine a Sakurai-led Pokemon game? He'd raise the bar so high that he'd risk giving someone a heart attack. Now that's talent. I definitely have my issues with Nintendo and how they've handled elements of the Switch 2 this year, but I think the one thing I'll actually defend them on is leaving the first year of the Switch 2's game lineup in the care of comparatively smaller series and more niche titles. I know a lot of people are disappointed we didn't start this console off with a brand new 3D Mario or Zelda, but I kinda like that they got sidelined for the time being. After all, just because a game can't reach as wide of an audience doesn't mean it's lesser in terms of quality. You only need to look at Kirby Air Riders to see that. Alternatively, you could look at this 3D Donkey Kong game. Wait, what year is it? Oh my god. It's somehow been over a decade since the last mainline DK game. And get ready for this, it's been over 25 years since the last DK 3D platformer. A quarter of a century since Donkey Kong 64. That's unbelievable. And yet, we weren't expecting anything from DK anytime soon. With Retro Studios working on Metroid Prime 4, we thought DK was doomed to stagnate for however much longer while the team behind his 2D revival were busy. Little did we know that Nintendo EPD, the biggest division of Nintendo, who are the ones behind games like Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey, was going to be the source of our long-awaited Donkey Kong platformer. Didn't see that one coming. What a knockout punch this game was. Despite this being the dev team's first time out with Mr. Kong, they managed to give us a 3D platformer that in many ways rivals and debatably even surpasses the best of 3D Mario. The ability to destroy terrain and dig underground gives this game such an unrivaled sense of satisfaction and power, and in tandem with DK's surplus of mobility and combat options, along with bizarre animal transformations all with their own unique skills, Donkey Kong ends up feeling like one of the most versatile and enjoyable characters I've played as in any game. where you can go from thoughtful platforming to turf surfing with swagger to fulfilling your monkey brain desires by punching everything that moves and most everything that doesn't move. Each layer is like a giant picturesque sandbox where you have the freedom to do anything you want. There's a lot of simple pleasure in sweeping the landscapes high and low, treasure hunting, building up your stockpile of gold, fossils, and bananas, and yet the path towards progression is never too far away once you care enough to get things moving again. And massive props to the devs for taking one of the biggest complaints from Odyssey and completely fixing it here. Odyssey got dragged for having so many moons that they lose value as main collectibles, where collecting any more beyond what's necessary feels underwhelming, if not outright unrewarding. While Bonanza still has a gargantuan 777 Vanadium gems, they feel far more rewarding to collect because you don't actually need to collect them. There's no arbitrary progression gates to block you off from progression, and instead, bananas give you skill points to upgrade DK in each of his Bonanza forms in all sorts of ways. Now all of a sudden, you want to comb these areas for bananas whenever you have the chance because you're always working towards a handy new skill or upgrade, like gliding as an ostrich or slowing down time as a snake. Or even just a health or strength boost that you might need to survive some of these later layers and all the heat they bring. I also found myself really endeared by the story. Most Donkey Kong games have remarkably simple stories, with the Kong of the Hour simply trying to save their banana horde, or their island, or their family, or all three at that one time. But Bonanza actually tosses a curveball in the form of a young Pauline that sticks with DK for the adventure as he protects her from Void Kong's avarice-coded ambitions as they plunge deeper and deeper into the planet's core for the chance at wishing themselves back home, and also bananas, because of course. These two have one of the most adorable friendships I've ever seen from a game, and the little moments they have together are each worth their weight in gold. I love watching Pauline slowly come out of her shell from DK's coaxing, and she's become one of my favorite Mario characters entirely thanks to her appearance here, helping that she's also contributing all the best music in the game. And that's to say nothing about the new villains, who are all brimming of spirit and charm that run circles around the personality-less Tiki bad guys and the slightly less personality-less Snow Vikings. Or the entire finale, which felt like Nintendo captured lightning in a bottle. You know what I'm talking about. They only get to play that card once, and yet they did so flawlessly. It's quickly risen through the ranks to become one of my favorite endgames in a 3D platformer, and one of my favorites across Nintendo's entire catalog. Yes, the camera can be unhelpful sometimes when you're underground. Yes, the zebra form is kinda janky. And yes, the game is incredibly easy, especially if you're stocking up on bananas and skill points as often as possible. But I just don't think that's even remotely enough to dampen my enthusiasm for it. And I would be happy if these easier 3D games ran alongside the trickier 2D games. We just need more of both, Nintendo. Seriously. Donkey Kong Bonanza is the current crown jewel of the Switch 2 and passes just well enough to be considered a modern Nintendo classic. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I really wasn't expecting to make this video, but I'm glad I did because I made a conscious effort to play more games and get outside of my comfort zone in some cases. And yet, for all the praise I've heaped on the previous 9 titles, I'll be fully honest in that my number 1 was the easiest choice to make. My heart and mind were open to being changed, but Hades 2 was practically destined to take its place as my favorite game of 2025. I guess you could say it was only a matter of time. For those of you who don't know, the original Hades is one of my favorite games ever made. It's my favorite indie game, and it's my favorite game released in the 2020s so far. And yet I wasn't feverishly tripping over myself to play the sequel. I didn't even bother with its early access, and only sat down to experience it once it was properly released. Hard to say if that was the right move, or if it would have impacted my judgment in any meaningful way, but clearly I loved the game, so I guess I shouldn't dwell on what could have been. I've already spent so much time in this game, and yet I still find myself yearning to play it instead of finishing this video. I'll admit that my main concern for Hades 2 would be a massive change in tone. One of my favorite things about the first Hades is that, despite it seeing the Lord of the Dead clashing with his son, with the other gods and goddesses getting involved, it's a surprisingly chill and laid-back adventure. There's high personal stakes for Zagreus and a couple other characters, but the overall stakes are incredibly low to the point where even the characters acknowledge it. There isn't some catastrophic force that you're trying to stop, and you have a literal eternity to accomplish your goal, and everyone behaves as such. To make the second game about Hades being usurped and the underworld being taken over by Kronos, who's also spearheading an assault on Olympus, and you having to stop him as Hades' daughter, Not gonna lie, I feared the game was gonna be a little too serious and stuffy all throughout. Thankfully that wasn't the case, and while the game knows when to get serious, it also retains the original game's charisma and sublime writing. Melinoë is a total departure from Zag character-wise, but she's just as compelling. Despite being raised from birth as a Titan killer, she's not at all a buzzkill. She's dutiful and painfully naive at times, but as the game progresses, you do notice her edges soften and her wisdom grow. And while she's usually playing the comically serious to others, you do get to see her playful side come out and see her get better at trading quips in real time. I'm gonna say it, she's my favorite character to come out of gaming this year. The gameplay, meanwhile, retains all the original strengths of being one of the best roguelites ever made. Every run is different from the next based on what you bring and what gods decide to bless you, and the game starts out borderline impossible of how weak you are, what little you have, and how dangerous the road to Tartarus is. But between you using what you find on your runs to strengthen Melinoë and cast incantations to improve your chances, on top of what you as a player learn from watching enemy behaviors and boss patterns, you're able to get better at the game in double quick time. And before long, you'll be consistently knocking on the door of Grandfather Time himself. If that wasn't enough, you also have essentially double the game to play as Hades 1, by letting you both go downwards towards Kronos sitting on Dad's throne, and upwards towards Mount Olympus through a war-torn surface world. So you know what that means. Even more new characters to interact with, even more boss fights against Greek myth icons, and even more dialogue. I really can't stress enough how much I adore the dialogue in these games. I could listen to these guys talk for hours.
My disciples and I all salute you on account of having made it up to the big mountain, young one. Back when we drew breath, we could only dream of those hallowed heights.
I appreciate the encouragement, Commander, but I've got a bit of a climb still. The legions of Kronos are there in droves, and the mountain's defenses can't tell us apart.
Surely you jest. The mechanical marvels wrought by the gods themselves turned their deadly appendages on you? When you went all that way to help them out?
Basically, yes.
That's too bad.
I mean, what else do I need to say to sell you on Hades 2? The visuals are spectacular, the soundtrack is loaded up with bangers, it plays off the first game in a really interesting way both in narrative and gameplay, and yet is still really enjoyable as a standalone title. Everyone in this game looks frickin' gorgeous, and the character design still continues to impress. It's just $30, you can pet your large frog, and one of the first bosses is against Scylla and her Siren Rock Band that perform as they fight you. Supergiant Games, I have no idea what you're making next, but I will be there day one. This has been Baleography, and I wish you all my very best.